The surrounding classmates gradually quieted down and looked over. Boda congratulated me. I heard you've made great progress, but you have to admit your own mediocrity. Look at how hard you work. Your ceiling is just about here. I don't expect anything else. Just apologize to me, and I'll forgive you. This matter will be over. His expression was so superior, as if he was bestowing charity on a beggar. The self-pity in my heart instantly ignited into a raging fury. I'm not afraid of being looked down upon by others, but if I give in, even I won't respect myself. I slowly stood up and stared directly into his eyes. There are still 3 months left. It's yet to be known who will come out on top. You shouldn't be so happy just yet. Such a stubborn duck. He chuckled. I hope you can be this tough when the time comes. Though I wasn't satisfied with my own results. However, the homeroom teacher and several other teachers praised me. They held up my test paper with joy. Look at Boda. In just 2 months, he's moved up from the bottom to 27th place. What does this show? It shows that hard work leads to success. Everyone should learn from Boda and strive to make progress. I felt a bit torn inside. On one hand, I was proud of the results I had achieved in just 2 months, full of self-satisfaction. On the other hand, I was acutely aware of how far I still was from MEI Jibo, a gap of over 100 points in 3 months. Out of over 200 people, can I really do it? After school, my old classmates and their little sisters came looking for me again. Boda, a guy carrying a Chanel bag, put his arm around my shoulder and said, "Why haven't you been hanging out with us lately? He's a good student now. Studying hard, you know?" Another guy chimed in sarcastically, "How can he hang out with us slackers anymore? Come on, there's an event tonight. We're hiring a band, your favorite one. Time to relax. Have a drink." I hesitated as I looked at them. I was really tempted. I've been so tired lately, waking up earlier than the chickens and going to bed later than the dogs. I really have been pushing myself too hard. Sometimes I feel sleepy even while eating. Going out for a drink ... It feels like it's been forever. I've made so much progress. Maybe I deserve a little break? Just for a while. Alright, let's go check it out. I grabbed my bag and followed them to catch a taxi. Right, one of the sisters laughed. Our family is so rich. Why work so hard at studying those dead books? In the future, won't they all be working for us anyway? A bunch of poor fools. I didn't say anything and followed them into the bar. At this hour, there usually weren't too many people. But tonight, with the event going on, there were already quite a few. Handsome guys and pretty girls were walking in steadily at the entrance. The flashing lights hit the ground, colorful and fragmented. Let's start with a 3,888 package. One of the sisters sat down in the booth, handed me a pipe. Take a hit. I casually ordered a drink. I sat there zoning out. A few guys walked over, asking if we wanted to have a drink together. I felt the deafening music, the noisy crowd, and suddenly felt out of place. This used to be almost like my second home, but now I felt so uncomfortable. In my heart, a sudden inexplicable guilt washed over me. I shouldn't be wasting time here. How many words could I have memorized by now? What about today's vocabulary? Boda, why are you spacing out? Drink up, one of the guys nudged me and poured me a glass of beer. One of the girls from earlier took out her phone and asked for my WeChat. As I looked at all this, I only felt an empty, painful void in my heart. I told myself, I need to get out of here. Without another thought, I stood up abruptly, throwing out a quick, "I have something to do," as I rushed outside. Everyone behind me was shouting, "Where are you going? Finish your drink before you leave. It won't make a difference if you stay one more day. Aren't you tired?" Those voices, like the whispers of devils, tempting me to fall back into old habits. I fled from the bar as if I were escaping, flagged down a random taxi and jumped inside. Only after I sat down in the car Did I finally exhale in exhaustion, looking out at the bustling city, bright lights and nightlife? I felt an indescribable melancholy, but I quickly pushed that feeling aside. I was already late getting back. Who knows how? Yue will scold me today? She might even hit me. However, the previously suppressed feelings seemed to be easing, and the guilt was disappearing. When I got home, Yue was indeed waiting in the room. I felt a bit guilty. Pretending as if nothing had happened, I walked in. "Where did you go?" she asked, standing by the window, her black hair naturally falling, with strands catching the golden light. I licked my lips and awkwardly replied, "Nowhere. I just had something to do today." Yue turned her head, staring at me. "You drank, didn't you?" Her nose was sharper than a dog's this time. I only had a sip, but she still caught the scent. My lie exposed. I felt a mix of shame and anger, so I threw my bag onto the table and bluntly said, "Yes, I went drinking. I've been studying for so many days." "So what?" Yui's gaze was cold as she looked at me. "How many points did you score?" I asked around. 559, right? 27th place. At best you'll get into a second-tier school. Not a chance at a first-tier school. Boda, she looked down at me. The disdain in her eyes was unmistakable and unhidden. "You think you're impressive, don't you?" Her words deeply wounded my pride. I angrily retorted, "I've only been studying for just over 2 months, and all you do is call me dumb. Say that I'm not good enough. Is that how you should be?" Yue crossed her arms. "And should I lie and say you're amazing?" Boda, what right do you have to go drinking? Do you even realize how far behind you are from the top? With that attitude, you still dream of getting into Tsinghua? Tsinghua wouldn't even take you if it were a vocational school. None of this is your business. My rationality snapped. I shouted, but as soon as the words left my mouth, I regretted it. Any progress I've made is largely thanks to you, Yue. He's been teaching me every day, never once complaining. When my mom offered him money, he stubbornly refused to accept it. At Tsinghua Masters and PhD student, tutoring a high schooler like me. What's he getting out of it? And I still don't show gratitude. But before I could say anything, Yui's expression changed. His thick, dark eyebrows slightly arched. A flash of anger crossed his face. "So that's what you think? You're right, it's none of my business. I really am just a busybody." With that, he took long strides out the door, slamming it hard behind him. I felt a sting in my eyes. Throwing aside any thoughts of pride, I ran after him, following right on his heels. Just as the elevator doors were about to close, I reached out and shoved my hand in. The doors pinched my hand and reopened. I yelped in pain. "Are you crazy?" Boda, Yue stepped out, grabbing my wrist. "What do you want now?" Tears uncontrollably streamed down my face. Choking up, I said, "I was wrong, Yue. I was wrong, please forgive me." He frowned. It looked like he wanted to scold me, but when he spoke, his voice softened. "You really are something else. Always crying." He sat me down at the table. Sniffling, I took out my papers. "Stop crying." Yue somewhat roughly wiped my face with a tissue. "And you still have the nerve to cry for scoring such a low grade? All that studying just went to waste, didn't it?" I opened my mouth to argue, but he quickly pinched it shut. "All right. I'll admit you've made some progress. Now hurry up and review your mistakes. This problem, you've done something similar before, so why did you still get it wrong? Didn't I cover this? What were you even listening to? And this one, if I remember correctly, this is the 3rd time you've made the same mistake, right?" Boda, you better perk up those ears and listen carefully. That whole evening was spent with Yue going over the test paper. Time passed both quickly and slowly. Around 10 o'clock, Yue set down his pen and looked at me seriously, asking, "Boda, what do you think you're studying for?" Without hesitation, I replied, to surpass Emi Ijibo and Liu Ryan. Yue said nothing. He stood up and walked over to the bed. He's quite tall, around 168 centimeters. With a graceful figure, the night shadows draped over him. His profile hidden in the darkness. Barely visible. Tutor, we study for ourselves. Yue's voice was soft, falling into the boundless night. I hope you understand. Studying isn't everything, but it can give you the opportunity to choose. We don't want to spend our whole lives being the ones who are chosen. Walking down the only path available to us, studying will allow you to open higher doors. Only then. He turned to look at me, his eyes deep and penetrating. Will you have the right to choose your own life? I stared at him blankly, opening my mouth slightly, but I couldn't find the words. Yue didn't seem to expect a response. He walked over, patted my head, then grabbed his bag and left. Before he left, he said, "You did well this time. You've made great progress. Keep it up." I watched his bag as he walked away, and couldn't help but smile like an idiot. In the days that followed, I didn't go out to play anymore. I devoted myself entirely to studying. I suddenly understood Yue's words. Studying is how we give ourselves the right to choose our lives. I started waking up even earlier and staying up later. Every day, I woke up at 5 a.m., first memorizing 100 vocabulary words, then going to early morning study sessions. During class, I took detailed notes and reviewed them during breaks. I even stopped taking afternoon naps. Instead, I would close my eyes and silently recite what I had recently learned, relaxing my eyes at the same time. After school in the evenings, I would walk home, using the time to stretch and move around, wearing headphones to listen to English. Yue would help me with tutoring for 2 to 3 hours, and after he left, I'd review on my own for another hour. Before going to sleep, I'd go over everything I learned that day, revisiting the material to ensure I remembered it all. If there was something I couldn't recall, I'd immediately get up and check. I wouldn't go to sleep until I had everything sorted out. I even dreamed about studying, sometimes waking up in the middle of the night to check a point I suddenly remembered. At first, my mom was overjoyed to see how much I was improving. She was so happy. She went out every day to brag about it. At home, my mom started making all kinds of delicious food for me, but now she's become worried. Every time we sit down for a meal, she anxiously tries to persuade me. Boda, what if you wear yourself out? What will happen to your health? But I couldn't rest. If I did, I'd feel an overwhelming sense of guilt. I even found myself thinking, what is Mei Jibo doing right now? Is he studying? If so, am I falling behind him again? The days passed by like this, one after another. Sometimes I even lost track of time. All I could see was my own grades, rising at a pace that could only be described as terrifying. In the third monthly exam, I ranked 16th. In the fourth monthly exam, I climbed to 8th. By the time of the fifth monthly exam, I even surpassed Liu Ryan, losing to Mei Jibo by just 3 points. When the results came out, Liu Ryan was stunned. He was almost in disbelief, checking his test paper over and over. It wasn't until he had gone through every score that he finally collapsed into his chair. I saw him turn to look at me, his eyes filled with disbelief and shock. I avoided his gaze, focusing intently on reviewing my mistakes. By now, no one accused me of cheating anymore. All my classmates had gotten used to my progress. They could all see how hard I was working, though they were still amazed each time the scores came out. No one looked down on me anymore. Now everyone would come to me with questions and copy my answers and papers. I became the student everyone talked about. The teachers treated me like a treasure. I was held up as a model student, used as an example everywhere. My perfect essays and test papers were displayed in the hallways. I had gradually become accustomed to all of this, no longer feeling pride. Now, there was only one belief in my heart. that drove my almost obsessive efforts to surpass MEI Jibo and get into Tsinghua University. As I was leaving school, Liu Ryan blocked my way. Tutor, he stood in front of me, but the usual disdain in his eyes was gone. In the natural world, the rule is survival of the fittest, and humans are no different. Admiration for the strong is ingrained in us. Liu Ryan no longer had the right to look down on me, and didn't dare to anymore. But I had no time to argue with him. He was already a defeated opponent. Jibo, you're impressive. His expression was complex, as if he didn't recognize me anymore. You seem like a different person. I didn't have time for his nonsense, so I cut straight to the point. If you have something to say, just say it. Liu Ryan glanced at me, then lowered his head and said, I hope you can call off your bet with MEI Jibo. We're all classmates. There's no need to make things so ugly. When the time comes, if things get out of hand, it won't look good for you either. Can you talk to him and just drop it? I was almost amused by his shamelessness. Why should I? Why don't you tell him to come to me? MEI Jibo is pretty proud. He definitely won't admit defeat. You and he don't have any deep-seated enmity after all. Besides, the reason you've made such big progress is because we motivated you. Why don't you just humble yourself and apologize to him? He frowned as he looked at me, as if he found his own words perfectly reasonable. As I stared at Liu Ryan's face, a surge of disgust welled up inside me. How could he have the nerve to make such a self-righteous demand of me? How could he even bring himself to say that? I must have been blind to like him before. Thank me? Thank my foot. If anyone deserves thanks, it's only my own relentless effort. I scoffed coldly. Who the hell do you think you are? You think you deserve my gratitude? If you're so bored, why don't you go find a job in a factory? Stop being delusional here. Just as I was about to leave, it dawned on me. Was this really Liu Ryan's idea? Or was MEI Jibo afraid and sent him to negotiate? A malicious smile spread across my lips. Could it be that MEI Jibo is scared? You go and tell him if he's willing to kneel and apologize to me. I might just be generous enough to let this go. A flicker of anger flashed in Liu Ryan's eyes. You're really pushing it. Jibo, I came to talk to you, giving you a chance so you won't be embarrassed when you lose. Don't blame me for not giving you this opportunity. I laughed and looked up, fixing my gaze on Liu Ryan. With disdain, I said, defeated loser. You're not even worthy. Come talk to me after you surpass me. Liu Ryan was completely enraged. He spat out coldly, unreasonable, and stormed off quickly. I watched his retreating figure. I let out a breath that had been pent up in my chest. Damn, that felt good. In the final month leading up to the end of term exams, both MEI Jibo and I started studying like our lives depended on it. Now we both knew that only the two of us were true rivals, and this battle would have only a winner and a loser. There would be no tie. The winner would be showered with praise and admired by everyone. The loser would be shamed and lose all face. MEI Jibo had always been seen as a so-called genius. He often claimed that he never studied at home, that everything was just natural to him. But now, he no longer made such claims. After class, he wouldn't even take bathroom breaks. He just stayed at his desk, studying every day. Several times, I noticed him coming to class in the morning with dark circles under his eyes, clearly having pulled an all-nighter. Unlike his previous nonchalant attitude, he truly saw me as a threat now. While I felt a sense of pride, my sense of urgency grew even stronger. I wished I could find 25 hours in a day to study. Classmates who had been on the sidelines started to become more interested in the situation. When I first said I was going to challenge MEI Jibo, everyone had mocked me. But after the 5th monthly exam, no one called me delusional anymore. Real ability will silence everyone. No one dares to look down on the strong. In fact, many began to speculate that I might really surpass MEI Jibo. One time, I even saw Mei Jibo arguing with one of his cronies, because that crony had advised him not to stress too much over it. Mei Jibo lost control and yelled at him. What do I have to be anxious about? Jiboda isn't worth my anxiety. If you can't speak properly, just shut your mouth. His crony didn't dare say anything else, and walked away, clearly upset. I overheard the whole thing. But I didn't get angry. Mei Jibo's state showed that he was afraid. He knew that I might really surpass him. Finally, the day of the final exams arrived. The day before the exam, Yuyue didn't tutor me. Instead, he handed me a carton of fresh milk. Drink this while it's hot and then go to bed early. Get some rest tonight, so you'll have the energy to face the battle tomorrow. My heart was already pounding with nerves. The exam was about to start, and suddenly I felt a wave of panic. My forehead and palms were sweating uncontrollably. What if I can't beat Mei Jibo? What if I'm not as good as him? After all, he's been working hard too. He already had a strong foundation, and with his efforts, what if he's improved even more? Am I really going to have to stand at the school gate and shout that I'm nothing? That would be unbearable. I couldn't live with myself. I'd become a joke that would solidify Mei Jibo's legendary status. Yuyue, I looked at him in terror and trembled as I said, what if I don't beat him? I expected him to be his usual sharp-tongued self, to scold me and tell me I'm worthless. But instead, Yuyue reached out and patted my head. His hand was a bit rough, dry and warm, as if it had some kind of magic. That soothed my anxiety. He asked Jiboda, are you doubting me? The student I've taught can't be inferior to others. Don't belittle yourself to boost someone else's ego. As he said this, he squatted by the bedside, looking at me. Yuyue's pupils were dark and deep. When he stared at someone, it felt as if he could draw their very soul in. Suddenly, for no apparent reason, I felt my face grow warm. After a moment, he smiled. You can do this. You're actually very smart. Before, it was just because your foundation was weak. But now, you've caught up. You're definitely stronger than anyone else. If I say you can win, then you definitely can. This was the first time Yuyue had genuinely praised me. I felt a sting in my eyes, and tears began to well up, but my heart truly calmed down. I thought even if I didn't believe in myself, I should at least believe in Yuyue. I can do this. The next morning, I arrived at school early. Oddly enough, I didn't feel the same nervousness from the night before. Instead, I was filled with an extreme sense of calm. Mei Jibo also arrived early. We exchanged just one glance and saw the battle in each other's eyes. He sat at his desk and said to me, there's no turning back now. Jiboda, my grades aren't the result of shortcuts. Soon you'll realize trash will always be trash. I didn't argue. I just smiled and asked him one question. Are you scared? Mei Jibo's eyes filled with hatred. I could hear his teeth grinding. After a moment, he let out a cold snort and turned away. After a moment, he let out a cold snort and turned away. The sound of the exam bell rang out quickly. The test paper was placed on my desk. I stared at it, took a deep breath, and began answering the questions. The first question I knew it. The second question I've done this one before. The third question simple. I didn't even notice the passage of time. When I finally looked up after finishing all the questions, less than 60 minutes had passed on the clock. I didn't feel complacent. Instead, I settled down and checked my answers again and again. Sure enough, on my second review, I caught a careless mistake where I had misread the question. I broke out in a cold sweat and quickly corrected it. Just then, the bell rang. The test was over. The next two exams went smoothly as well. That night, I didn't study anymore. I just collapsed into bed and fell asleep. At this point, studying more wouldn't make a difference. I figured it was better to get a good night's sleep. and recharge my energy. When I woke up, I felt completely refreshed. I had only been sleeping around 5 hours a night before. But now, after 8 hours of sleep, I felt like a new person. But it wasn't the same for Mei Jibo. When I looked at him, his dark circles were even more severe than before. His eyes sunken in, with huge bags under them. He squinted as he silently recited something. He looked like he had been drained of all his energy by some kind of demon. It was obvious he hadn't slept until well past 1 a.m. last night. He must have stayed up all night cramming. I shook my head. What's the point of cramming at the last minute? Seeing him like that, I calmed myself down even more, becoming steadier as I worked through the questions. Everything seemed to be going smoothly. But just when I thought that this exam would end without any hiccups, an unexpected challenge suddenly arose. When I reached the last question, I stared at the paper, my pupils contracting sharply. The final problem was a geometric figure. But how was I supposed to draw the auxiliary line? I wasn't sure. Due to time constraints, the math exam, which should have been in the second session, was scheduled for the last one. Math had always been my weakest subject. My logical thinking isn't particularly strong, but in recent days, I had worked through almost every relevant practice problem I could find. I believed that hard work could make up for my shortcomings. The earlier questions had indeed gone smoothly. I hadn't encountered any that stumped me, but this final problem was tricky. If you didn't examine it carefully, it seemed simple, just another routine problem. But upon closer inspection, the traps became evident. Sweat began to bead on my forehead, and my hands started to tremble slightly. This question was worth 15 points. Not too high, not too low. But for someone like me or Mei Jibo, where a single point could decide the outcome, making a mistake here could be a misstep leading into a bottomless abyss. I couldn't help but lift my head and glance at Mei Jibo. His expression was relaxed. After jotting down a number on his paper, he confidently set down his pen, stretched his arms, and rested his head on the desk to relax. He even had a slight smirk on his lips. My heart sank. Could it be that Mei Jibo didn't read the question carefully? Or maybe he actually got it right? My mind was in turmoil. The July summer heat was unbearable. The cicadas outside were making a maddening racket, and a drop of sweat slid off my chin onto the desk. For a moment, my mind went completely blank. I thought to myself, I'm done, I've lost. But just as I was on the verge of breaking down, a face suddenly flashed through my mind. A pale face, half-shadowed by the setting sun. Yuyue stood by the window, calmly looking at me. She said, "Jiboda, why are you studying?" What did I say back then? I said I wanted to surpass Mei Jibo. I wanted to get into Tsinghua University. But then she looked out the window, her voice mingling with the twilight and the breeze. You're studying for yourself, to gain the right to choose your own life. Jiboda, you're studying for yourself, for you and you alone. The right to choose my own life. It was as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over me, and I suddenly calmed down. After studying for so long, I had become obsessed, focusing all my attention on Mei Jibo. I had forgotten the true purpose of studying. Studying is for myself, not just to be chosen, but to give myself the power to choose. Mei Jibo is just a small chapter in my life. If I continue to fixate on him, then I would never be able to move beyond this small space. I exhaled deeply and steadied my mind. I no longer looked at Mei Jibo, who had put down his pen. Everything around me faded away. I focused all my energy on this one problem. The clock's hands ticked away. I don't know how much time passed, but suddenly a flash of insight hit me. The words of my math teacher echoed in my mind. When dealing with geometric figures, always consider special auxiliary lines first. I realized how the auxiliary line should be drawn. Not daring to waste any time, I quickly drew the line. and hurriedly wrote down the solution steps on the answer sheet. Just as I finished writing the last word, the bell rang. Time was up. I pushed the answer sheet away and nearly collapsed back into my chair, exhausted. A breeze blew in from the window, and I felt a cold, damp sensation on my back. My shirt had been soaked with cold sweat. After a long time, I finally gathered enough strength to lean forward. Mei Jibo was also looking at me. Our eyes met, and a spark seemed to ignite in the air between us. Neither of us spoke. At this point, words were meaningless. In 3 days, whether one is a god or a ghost will be revealed. The wait for the results felt both endless, and yet as brief as a moment. During those 3 days, I lost track of what I was doing. I couldn't focus on studying at all. Every time I opened a book, the final exam questions would flash before my eyes. Every night I dreamt. Sometimes I dreamt that I won, scoring over 700 points, far surpassing Mei Jibo, and laughing out loud in the dream. Other times I dreamt that I lost, failing by just 1 point, standing at the school gate, bowing and apologizing to Mei Jibo's mocking face, surrounded by people booing loudly. I would wake up in a cold sweat from these nightmares. I started reposting all kinds of good luck charms on Weibo, thanking the little dog that blocks bad luck, and the characters in Huan for warding off petty people. I felt like I was on the verge of going mad. But before I could even fully process it, the time to announce the results arrived. Sitting at my desk, my emotions swung back and forth between tension and calm. On one hand, I felt that the results no longer mattered. What I had achieved so far already proved everything. To me, personally, I had already succeeded. But on the other hand, just the thought of Mei Jibo once again being above me filled me with anger and even despair. I kept wrestling with myself over and over. It was obvious to anyone that Mei Jibo was also very nervous. He kept taking deep breaths, with Liu Ryan sitting beside him, trying to comfort him. Don't worry, Jibo, Jiboda doesn't stand a chance against you. His cronies chimed in as well. Mei Jibo, Jiboda is just a stepping stone. He could never catch up to you in a lifetime. I paid no attention to them at all. I just focused on the teacher who walked into the classroom. The homeroom teacher was smiling so widely that his eyes almost disappeared. He walked up to the podium with a cheerful expression. Quiet down. Students, the final exam results are out. Quiet down. All the students returned to their seats and stopped talking. Over 50 pairs of eyes were fixed on him. Our class did quite well this time. Not only did we have the highest average score in the grade, but the top 2 students in the grade are from our class. The homeroom teacher's gaze swept over me and Mei Jibo as he picked up the list in his hand. I held my breath. The silence in the classroom was palpable. Both Mei Jibo and I knew that those 2 students were definitely us. But there's a world of difference between first and second place. Second place means nothing. Only the first place winner is the true champion. Second place, the teacher drew out the words. My heart started pounding uncontrollably. Each beat so forceful it felt like it would burst out of my chest. Second place, Mei Jibo, 697 points. Mei Jibo performed excellently, scoring full marks in 2 subjects. Keep up the good work. It felt like a bolt of lightning had struck the room. Mei Jibo's body swayed violently, and then he collapsed onto Liu Ryan. But Liu Ryan didn't reach out to support him. She just stood there, mouth agape, turning around to look at me in shock, as if she had seen a ghost. First place, the teacher continued. At that moment, I felt an unusual calm inside. I had absolute confidence in myself, a confidence born from undeniable strength. First place, Jiboda. Incredible. I didn't even know what to say. Jiboda, with a score of 701, keep this up, and getting into Tsinghua won't be a problem. Jiboda, you must continue studying hard. Don't get complacent, and don't slack off. Emi Jibo suddenly turned around, bumping the desk behind him out of place. His face was deathly pale, and his expression was indescribable, as if he wanted to tear me apart with his gaze, fierce and intense. I felt like he might rush over and try to kill me the next second. I gave him a slight nod and made a gesture that reminded him, "Don't forget your promise." The classroom fell silent for a moment, and then erupted into chaos. Everyone exaggeratedly craned their necks to look at me. They were too shocked to even gasp in amazement, just staring at me in disbelief. After a long pause, everyone ignored the homeroom teacher and started shouting loudly, "Holy crap, Jiboda is amazing. He really got first place. He's a genius, right? Only one semester. He might actually be a genius. I'm convinced I really am. This is just incredible." Emi Jibo really has to apologize to him now. Their faces were filled with surprise and admiration, their eyes reflecting disbelief and awe. I looked around the room, feeling a sensation that was hard to put into words. I remembered how these same people used to have a completely different attitude. They all mocked me back then, calling me delusional and unrealistic. They said I was daydreaming, boasting that's what they used to say about me. But 5 months later, I used my strength to slap every one of them in the face. Now they all knew. Jiboda wasn't just bragging. I have the absolute strength to back up my goals. I damn well have what it takes to make good on my words. I savored the praise and admiration that surrounded me, but suddenly a smiling face flashed through my mind. Yue's face! I thought I need to tell her this good news. As I left the school that evening, I could feel everyone around me watching. They pointed at me, whispering, "That's Jiboda, right? He's amazing, just like before." But back then, they would say, "That's the lagger." Jiboda, my emotions were mixed. Just as I was about to move forward, my arm was suddenly grabbed hard. I gasped in pain, turning back, and saw that it was Emi Jibo. Alright, he still hadn't fulfilled our bet. I had almost forgotten. At this moment, Emi Jibo looked almost deranged. The long nights of studying had left his cheeks sunken, dark circles under his eyes. He looked almost like a ghost. His expression was twisted, his eyes bloodshot. Holding a test paper in his hand, he shouted, "Jiboda, this question was marked wrong." I just went to the teacher and got the points back. I'm now at 701.5. I didn't lose to you. I'm still the top student. The surrounding students erupted in an uproar. This famous bet was known by almost everyone in the school. Now, everyone was crowded at the school gate to watch the drama unfold. In an instant, the entrance was packed tightly with onlookers. "So, what now?" He glared at me fiercely, his nails nearly digging into my flesh. "Trash will always be trash." The curve of his mouth was exaggerated and twisted. "You will never beat me." The surrounding crowd was taken aback by this sudden turn of events. They gathered around, whispering, "Wow, after all, it's Emi Jibo. He's always been number one. And he definitely has the skills." What a shame, it was just a 0.5 point difference. Jiboda did great too, but the time was just too short. The voices around us were chaotic. Some were supporting Emi Jibo. Others were feeling sorry for me. I yanked my arm away forcefully, causing Emi Jibo to stumble back. "Jiboda, say it now. Say that you're nothing. Come on, say it. A bet's a bet. Don't make me lose respect for you." Emi Jibo tried to grab me again, but I sidestepped him and shrugged off my backpack. Emi Jibo thought I was about to fulfill the bet. His eyes lit up with excitement, and he pulled out his phone to record. This guy was truly malicious, still planning to capture the moment on video. It seems I didn't need to feel any pity for him. I calmly unzipped my bag, pulled out a test paper, and unfolded it in front of the crowd. The original score of 95 had been crossed out and replaced with a 100. I smiled, Looking directly into Meijibo's eyes, sorry, I also got 5 points back. My score should be 706. Now, go ahead and admit that you're not as good as me. And apologize. I threw his words right back at him. Meijibo abates a bet. Don't make me lose respect for you. Meijibo's expression visibly changed as the redness drained from his face, leaving him pale as a ghost. He stammered, impossible. This can't be. I'm supposed to be first. The crowd erupted in shock. Almost everyone gasped at the revelation. The scene turned into chaos, with people saying all sorts of things. Most of them were mocking Meijibo. I watched as they pointed fingers and criticized him, feeling a sudden sense of disorientation. Back when I challenged him, everyone said I was talking nonsense. Now it seemed like everything had flipped. Meijibo stood there utterly defeated. His legs gave out, and he collapsed onto the nearest classmate. The crony who had always been by his side seemed embarrassed and quickly pushed him away before disappearing into the crowd. Meijibo was left sitting on the ground, dazed, muttering, impossible. This can't be. As I looked at him in this state of shock, nearly losing his sanity, I suddenly found it all very boring. Meijibo was someone who had gotten to sitting on the throne. The moment he was pulled down, he completely crumbled. Such a person was no longer worthy of being my opponent. I looked down at Meijibo and quietly said, if you don't want to honor the bet, fine. But I've lost all respect for you. With that, I turned to leave. Everyone instinctively parted to make way for me. I had only taken a few steps when, just as I was about to get into the car, I suddenly heard Meijibo scream from behind me. Jibota, I'm sorry. I admit I'm not as good as you, but I won't accept it. Next time, I will take back the top spot. I paused for a moment, but without turning back, I got into the car and went home. I had become famous with just one battle. At home, my parents were so happy they couldn't stop smiling. A few times, my mom would be in the middle of eating, and she would just start laughing out of nowhere. She would look at me with a dazed expression saying, oh my gosh, am I dreaming? How could I have such a smart son? Maybe I should have gone to college too. Who knows, maybe I could have gotten into Tsinghua or Peking University. Are you really my son? Maybe you were switched at birth? This is too perfect. Too much happiness. My dad, on the other hand, would roll his eyes and say, if the kid's smart, that definitely didn't come from you. He must have taken after me. Do you think our daughter could be a genius too? Maybe with an IQ of 180 or something? Let's go get her tested. My mom would put her chopsticks down with a snap and say, nonsense. She definitely takes after me. You can't even buy groceries without getting confused. The two of them would start bickering back and forth. I'd sit there laughing. The atmosphere in our home had never been this good before. Although my parents were always indulgent with me, back then I didn't study. I was always out at bars, coming home late at night. Their only reason to go to school was to get scolded, or to attend parent meetings, sitting in the back feeling ashamed. At home, my parents often sighed deeply because of me, disappointed at how unmotivated I was. But ever since I started studying seriously, it seems like everything has changed. I've truly made my mom proud. As I lay on my bed after dinner, I thought to myself, when should I share this good news with you, Yue? The fact that I achieved this score is not only due to my own hard work, but I also owe a great deal of thanks to you, Yue. I know that without him, no matter how hard I studied, I could never have improved this much. As a true genius, he taught me not just knowledge, but also how to learn effectively. These lessons are priceless. I closed my eyes and pressed my arm over my face as memories of everything I'd been through flashed before me. It was so hard, really incredibly hard. To be honest, even I don't know How I managed to get through this period. If I had to go through it again, I'm not sure if I'd have the same determination to keep going. Others only see my success. How I rose to the top with seemingly impossible speed. But they don't see the sleepless nights. The days filled with doubt. The nightmares that jolted me awake. I haven't taken a single nap since then. Rain or shine, school days or holidays. I've only slept 5 hours a night. At first, it was truly unbearable. I felt completely drained. And countless times, I thought about giving up, about taking a break, about resting. But in the end, I gritted my teeth and pushed through. Behind this miracle were my tears and sweat day after day, night after night. The bitterness of it all is something only I can truly understand. Just as my eyes began to sting with tears, there was a sudden knock at the door. I sat up and looked. It was UUA, dressed all in black. He leaned against the door frame, arms crossed over his chest. For once, there was no mocking smile on his face, no trace of sarcasm. Instead, there was a genuine smile. Hey, his eyes were filled with warmth, and his thin lips curved slightly upwards. I heard you got first place. Congratulations, my heart started racing. And with a burst of excitement, I jumped up from the bed and grabbed him. I got 706. I got first place. Aren't I amazing? I had never felt so happy before. And in that moment, I realized that the person I most wanted to share my joy with was him. Yes, he smiled as he tugged at my face. It seems you're not as clueless as I thought. No need for any more tests. My speech was garbled from his pulling, but I didn't mind. I just grabbed him and pulled him over to my desk. I eagerly showed him my test papers, one by one, telling him how difficult the last problem was and how I finally solved it. I explained how mediocrity made a mistake on that very question, which caused him to lose to me. I also told him that I had finally figured it out, that from now on, I would study for myself. UUA didn't interrupt me. He just propped his head up, watching me with a smile on his face, nodding constantly. By the time I finished talking, my mouth was dry and my throat parched. I looked at him, eyes shining with excitement. Teacher Yu, we study next semester. But UUA remained silent. After a long pause, he reached out and ruffled my hair. You've graduated. Your teacher can rest easy now. Did you really think I was going to be your private tutor forever? I have to go back to my own classes too. I froze. The words I wanted to say got stuck in my throat, making it hard to breathe. I looked at him, wanting to say, can't you stay a little longer? This was all so sudden, but I couldn't get the words out. Of course, I had forgotten. UUA wasn't my private tutor. He was a graduate student at Tsinghua, with a bright future ahead of him, far more promising than mine. Teaching me was just a detour. But now he had to go back to where he could shine. I couldn't hold him back. But it was all too sudden. I forced a casual smile. Time sure flies, doesn't it? UUA didn't say anything. He just looked at me steadily, his eyes deep and bright like black onyx. I felt the temperature on my face rise. As the air in the room grew warmer, the atmosphere became awkward. Just as I was about to say something, UUA suddenly stood up. Outside the window, the traffic flowed by. The lights were dazzling, the night wrapped in a kaleidoscope of neon colors. Seeping in through the window, he stood against this backdrop of night and smiled at me. Boda, I'll be waiting for you at Tsinghua. My eyes stung, and tears began to fall, okay? I wiped my tears away. I'll find you in a year. When I returned to school, everything had settled. I had replaced mediocrity as the new top student, the new legend. On the first day after school, Liu Ryan blocked my way. He hesitated for a long time, then quietly said, I broke up with mediocrity. I was impatient. What exactly are you trying to say? He bit his lip, struggling with his words, and finally squeezed out, I'm sorry, I was wrong before. Boda, Do you think there's any chance for us? I felt utterly disgusted. I didn't even let him finish his sentence before I cut him off. Do you think you deserve me? With that, I turned and walked away. Liu Ryan stood there, stunned. Even after I left the school, I could still see him standing there. Emi Jibo threw himself into studying even more intensely. He was now like the old me, studying with all his might every day, studying while eating, studying even while trying to sleep. But I had relaxed my approach. I realized that health is the most important thing. I paid attention in class and studied until 11 p.m. before going straight to bed, ensuring I got enough sleep. To maintain a healthy body, Emi Jibo, obsessed with surpassing me, only ended up being crushed even more by my steady performance. Perhaps he had gotten stuck in a mental rut. His mind didn't seem as sharp as it used to be. The way he looked at me grew more and more twisted. I felt like I had become his obsession. I wouldn't be surprised if he saw me in his nightmares. But it was all in vain. I continued to consistently perform at the top in every exam. There was no chance for him to make a comeback. He never had the opportunity to rise again. Time slowly passed by this way. Just when I had gotten used to this routine, the college entrance exams Gaokao arrived. It was the same scorching heat of June as last year's final exams. The sky was a clear blue, high and vast. The whole campus was filled with the hot wind and the sharp cries of cicadas. For some reason, fate brought me and Emi Jibo into the same exam room again. But this time, I was in front, and he was behind. I could feel his gaze burning into my back, as if it could bore a hole right through me. But I didn't care. I focused all my attention on the test paper in front of me. I had become accustomed to the rhythm of exams, yet this time, there was a faint sense of nervousness that I hadn't felt in a while. Time ticked by. 15 minutes later, the bell rang, and the whole world seemed to fall into silence, broken only by the sound of pen scratching across paper. The Gaokao had begun. When I think back to the Gaokao, I find my memories a bit hazy. Those 3 days felt as long as 3 years, and yet they passed by in the blink of an eye. When I finally set down my pen at the last moment, I was filled with an indescribable feeling. 3 years of high school. My youth had finally come to a dramatic end, but I had changed myself and redirected the course of my life. Now, I truly had the right to choose my future. After finishing the exams, I finally let go. It was over, and I didn't obsess over it. I completely pushed thoughts of studying out of my mind. For the past year and a half, I hadn't relaxed my focus on studying for even a single day. I had been in a constant state of tension. Now, suddenly, I didn't need to study anymore. At first, when I woke up in the morning, I was stunned for a moment, feeling a bit empty. But I quickly adapted to this new life. I started sleeping in until 11 a.m. and staying up late to play games at night. This time, my parents didn't scold me. I played without any guilt. By the end of the summer, I had reached the top rank in the game. My mom even bought me a few thousand yuan worth of skins as a reward. She also took me on a trip abroad. I was like a wild dog off its leash, completely going wild. I almost forgot about the exam results. When the results came out, I didn't even check them myself. My homeroom teacher was the one who told me my score. His voice was cracking with excitement over the phone. Jibo, you got the top score. 729 points. I froze. My brain stalled for a moment. Top score in the province, 729 points. In that moment, I didn't immediately feel happy. Instead, I thought about how I still scored 10 points less than Yu Yue. How on earth does his brain work? He must be an alien. My homeroom teacher's loud voice pulled me back from my wandering thoughts. Jibo, you need to choose your university wisely. Come back to school and we'll help you with your choices. You know, Peking University and Tsinghua will definitely call you. And who knows, maybe even Hong Kong University. What are you going to do? Which one will you choose? Peking University or Tsinghua? I smiled softly and quietly said, "Teacher, I'm going to Tsinghua." When I returned, by the time I returned, a banner had already been hung up at the school gate. It read, "Congratulations to Jiboda of Class 1, Senior Year, for becoming the Gaokao top scorer." A group of students had gathered below, pointing at the banner in admiration. They were all talking. "Whose kid is that? That's amazing. Why does the name Jiboda sound so familiar? Isn't he the one who was always at the bottom, wearing a cap?" I squeezed in from the side, planning to show my admission letter to the teachers. When I arrived at the office, all the teachers were there, smiling at me like I was some kind of rare treasure. It was as if they were looking at a giant panda. The math teacher poured me a cup of tea and said kindly, "Are you hot? Drink some water." I handed over my admission letter. They all clicked their tongues in admiration as they passed it around to have a look. The history teacher took off his glasses, leaning in close, reading each word carefully. Tsinghua's admission letter really is something else. A teacher nearby teased him, "Old Lei, never seen a Tsinghua admission letter before?" The history teacher laughed and cursed, "Damn it. I've never seen one for someone who was at the bottom of the class. Jiboda, you're truly amazing. When I teach the next batch next year, I'll have plenty to say." I chuckled and casually asked, "Teacher, where did Emi Ijibo and Liu Ryan end up?" To my surprise, as soon as I asked, the teachers' faces changed. After a moment, the math teacher sighed and said, "Emi Ijibo, that kid. He was too competitive. He insisted on going to Tsinghua and only filled out that one option on his application. We couldn't stop him, and his parents didn't try to persuade him either. His grades were good, sure, but this time, he barely made it. He couldn't accept the reality and insisted on repeating the year. No matter what we said, he wouldn't listen. Repeating a year is tough, and it might not be worth it in the end." As for Liu Ryan, I think she got into a 985 university. Not bad as far as I remember. The teachers quickly moved on from the topic. "Oh, Jiboda, in a few days, our school is holding a pep rally. Your story is so legendary. You absolutely must share it with your younger schoolmates to inspire them." I hesitated for a moment, then smiled and agreed. 2 days later, the school field was packed with people. Maybe it was because of my newfound fame, but many first-year students and even parents came to see me. A lot of the recent graduates also showed up, wanting to see the provincial top scorer in person. The crowd was overwhelming, even more than at a sports event. I stood on the stage. As the principal introduced my journey in detail from start to finish, he even read out every single one of my past scores, starting from when I was at the bottom of the class, second to last in the grade, then 236th, 118th, 34th, second, and finally all first places. This visual tale of rising from the bottom resonated with everyone present. The crowd erupted in cheers. Standing there, high above, I was filled with a deep sense of emotion. I had almost forgotten those days when I was at the bottom. How far I've come. I was once a negative example. Back then, everyone despised and looked down on me. I was just an ordinary person. I felt fear. I would back down. I was scared and I had regrets. I cried until I couldn't stop. And there were nights when I couldn't sleep because of nightmares. But in the end, I gritted my teeth and pushed through. Looking back, it all feels like a dream, something unbelievable. In less than 2 years, my life underwent an earth-shattering change. There are so many people I need to thank. I need to thank my parents. I need to thank you, Yue. And I need to thank the teachers who never gave up on me. But most of all, I need to thank the version of myself who walked alone in the darkness. After enduring those despair-filled nights, I finally reached the dawn of victory. I picked up my notes and scanned the field. And with one glance, I saw Mei Jibo and Liu Ryan standing among the crowd. I didn't know why they came. Maybe they were still unwilling to accept their fate. But across the sea of people, our eyes met for a brief moment. I quickly shifted my gaze, realizing that Mei Jibo was just a small chapter in my life. Perhaps I should even thank this chapter, for without the trials and humiliation of that period, I wouldn't have found the determination to work so hard afterward. But now I no longer pay attention to them. They are far behind me now. The summer sun was blindingly bright, yet not a single person on the field had left. I spread my arms wide and began to share my journey and study methods. I kept it simple. And finally, I looked at the crowd below and said in a deep voice, "Classmates, I hope you understand that studying isn't everything, but it gives us the opportunity to choose. We don't want to spend our entire lives being chosen, walking down a path where we have no other choice. Studying allows us to reach higher thresholds, and only then." I gripped the microphone tightly. Will we have the right to choose our own lives? After a brief silence, the crowd erupted into thunderous applause. I gazed into the distant sky. A smile of relief spread across my face. The next time I heard about Mei Jibo, it was during the summer break of my first year in university. Tsinghua was filled with the top students from all over the country. The academic atmosphere was on a completely different level than before. I was busy and fulfilled every day. By chance, a high school classmate mentioned Mei Jibo in the group chat. They said that after repeating a year, his mental state had worsened, and he still didn't get into Tsinghua. But Tsinghua had become an obsession for him. He wanted to repeat another year, but his parents forced him to fill out his college application. He ended up at a good school, but his dream would never come true. They lamented about it in the group chat. Some even remembered our rivalry and tagged me specifically, asking what I thought about it. I didn't respond, just felt a mix of emotions inside. As I was lost in thought, I suddenly bumped into someone, rubbing my head. I looked up. Just as I was about to say something, Yuyue handed me a cup of milk tea. "What are you daydreaming about? Not even watching where you're going," she said, grabbing my hand and pulling me forward. As we walked, she continued, "I've got a meeting this afternoon, but how about we go eat bullfrog afterward at your favorite place?" It was an August summer day, and the sun was shining just right.